Hello, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today for this event. My name is Licia Yafet. I'm the program manager at One World Media, and today we'll be talking about short documentaries and how to get them commissioned by international outlets. First of all, thank you to Encounters for having us today here to talk to everyone. So I'm joined today by Flora, Sifiso, and Marina, which I will introduce shortly. But before that, if you have any questions throughout the session, please write them in the chat and we'll get to them at the end of our conversation. So to begin with, One World Media is a London, UK-based charity, and we support filmmakers and journalists around the world covering underreported stories about the Global South. And alongside our annual award ceremony, which took place this Thursday, actually, we run new talent programs, including our fellowship, the Global Short Docs Forum, and trainings and events throughout the year. So as in the title, Global Short Docs Forum is one of our annual events, and we're launching the call for applications today with this panel discussion. And it's an intensive online training program for short documentary filmmakers from all around the world. We select 12 filmmakers with short documentary projects in production or post-production with some footage under 30 minutes. And over 4 weeks of training and masterclasses and mentoring, we prepare the filmmakers on the projects to one-to-one pitches with commissioners from international outlets, platforms looking for short docs. So we'll talk more about this, but let me introduce our panelists first. So Flora Gregory has more than 30 years of experience in broadcasting and bringing stories by local filmmakers around the world to an international audience. She conceived and ran Channel 4's Unreported World and was the founding commissioning editor of Al Jazeera's Witness. She has since then run workshops around the world. She's the director of GSDF and an exec producer and mentor for our One World Media Fellowship. I'm going to go quickly and then open it up to our panelists. So Sifiso is an award-winning filmmaker, documentary filmmaker, and archive researcher. His feature debut, Uprise, has traveled across international festivals. He won Best Director at Josie Film Festival for his documentary New Country, and I think his latest documentary, Mutant, was premiered last night at Encounters. He's been a judge for various awards and a founding member of the Association of Transformation in Film and Television. And he was one of our mentors at Global Short Docs Forum 2020. Marina Shupak, he is a filmmaker, an award-winning journalist, and an emerging self-shooting documentary filmmaker from Moldova. She has worked with the UN and has been a recipient of various prestigious fellowships. She has attended Global Short Docs Forum as a filmmaker in 2020, and her film Last Chance for Justice was commissioned there by BBC World News. She has also just won 2 One World Media Awards on Thursday, and congratulations, Marina, for that. We'll hear more about her journey in a little bit. So there's been many events as part of Encounters focusing on the documentary industry, about funding, productions, co-productions, distribution. And today we will specifically be talking about short documentaries. So yeah, to start, could you all tell us a bit about yourselves and how you work with short form documentary as a filmmaker, mentor, exec producer? So Flora, will you start?
Thank you. Thank you, Encounters, very much for guesting us. And thank you, Licia, for that whirlwind tour. So as Licia's already told you all what my credentials are, but I would say that I am very passionate about short documentaries. So having worked in documentaries for over 30 years and then run a half-hour series for Channel 4 and then gone on to start Witness, where we had an hour slot and a half-hour slot. And the interesting thing was that the hour slot, which we had 52 a year to fill, the thing is about the market for documentaries, I hate to call it that, and it's very crass, but is flooded with beautiful documentary films, and the half-hour market is not. So Whitney's always commissioned half-hour films, and they still do. So it's worth thinking about that. And then the new digital era with all of the platforms that are emerging, it actually doesn't really matter too much, I don't think, anymore what length the film is. There's an audience somewhere for it, but increasingly an audience for shorts, whatever a short is, and that's a whole new discussion. So my involvement is with shorts, working with One World Media with a fellowship, mostly on short films that fellows are making and fellowesses, and also launching 4 years ago the Global Short Docs Forum, and that's been a lovely journey. So that's enough for me. Is it?
Thank you, Flora. Yes, we'll come back to you with many questions. Sabisa, will you tell us how you work with short form documentary, please? You're on mute.
Thank you, Licia, and thank you to Encounters. So my very first film was actually a short documentary that's aired on BBC, and it was on train surfing. And I have been sort of involved in producing short documentaries since then. This was 2008, and you know, that was the first one that I produced and directed. And, you know, since then, as you mentioned, I've worked as a judge for, you know, several competitions, including the SAFTAs, which are the South African Film and Television Awards, but also as a juror for the International Emmys. So I get to watch a lot of short documentaries. I get to see short documentaries from the different platforms and see the specifics of what the different platforms are looking for, you know, and it's become clear to me that, you know, character-driven stories have become like, you know, a big, you know, like the focus, you know, rather than sort of like, you know, theme or topic-driven documentaries. So yeah, and I find that, you know, having worked a lot in feature documentaries, when I try and think about short documentaries and writing short documentaries, it's suddenly become harder for me to tell a story in a really short space of time. But it does help to engage with the formats, with, you know, with these different opportunities like judging and, you know, having to see what exists out there. So yeah, that's me in a nutshell.
Thank you so much. We're very lucky to have all of your expertise with us today. Marina, congratulations once again on your awards. Will you tell us a bit about your experience and how you work with short form documentary?
Thank you so much, Lisa, and many thanks to Encounters and One World Media for inviting me to join this panel. And I'm glad to join you from my home country, Moldova. For those who probably don't know, it's a small country in between Romania and Ukraine in Eastern Europe. So my journey with documentary film started quite recently. So I'm a professional journalist, and I've been always dreaming about making documentary films. And for the past 10 years, I was trying to get some technical experience and in documentary film industry. And in 2019, I was lucky enough to achieve my dream and start to study documentary filmmaking at University College London as I got Chevening scholarship. So this is where I finally started to make documentary films. So during this 1 year of studies, I produced 3 shorts, and my graduation film, Last Chance for Justice, is the one which I pitched to Global Short Docs Forum, and the one which recently won the One World Media Awards in the category of the Best Student Film and short film. So I'm looking forward to tell you more about this particular experience later today.
Thank you so much. We're really excited to hear more about that too. So I wanted to first ask everyone where do short documentaries live nowadays? Where are they? In festivals, TV, online? And what are the options for short documentary filmmakers? And what are those platforms looking for? I know that's a very broad question, but we'll narrow it down slowly. Flora, do you want to tell us a bit more about it?
There are an increasing number of digital platforms, and of course they all want something different. Although there is an overlap, some of them want something similar, but you do have to kind of study the form of each digital platform, and look at what they transmit, and analyze really what they're transmitting, and also which films do well as far as audiences, because that's what they will do more of, because they're all trying to get audience and crack that particular formula. But also the public service broadcasters, the traditional public service broadcasters, are also looking at shorts because they need a young audience. That all their audiences are, well, my age, and they and older, and they're clearly in need of rejuvenating their audiences, but the audiences are not there, and so they have to look at how to entice them. And so shorts are really important formula for them for the future. And then, so there, you know, I could reel off a list. So I'll reel off a little list, but not too long. Alicia's nodding, so that must be okay.
Yes, please.
So, for instance, our dear old BBC here are experimenting with shorts, and that experiment is always fairly fluid. So they're always looking at shorts, and actually a couple of platforms, their Arabic service particularly looks at shorts, and their Africa service. So that's quite interesting how that has happened, and there's a story to that which I'm not going to tell now. Then of course there's the sort of aggressively commercial platforms like Netflix and Amazon, who are starting to entertain shorts in a bigger and bigger way. And of course Vice, which is always going through some overhaul. They're always looking for shorts. The Guardian is a great international, much respected platform, and they have a very strong place for short documentaries. Al Jazeera, of course, my home, and also CBC in Canada is really championing shorts in a huge way, actually, and has some wonderful films. So that there are many others, NHK in Japan, you know, the list is sort of endless, really. So I'm just giving a flavour of them, but I would say it was a very dynamic area, and of course there are special channels on YouTube looking at shorts, and yes, I'll stop on that front. And of course there are a lot of festivals, and I was just looking at the list of festivals, and I admit to not being a complete festival fan, because I know that platforms are where the audiences are. And I think audience for me is incredibly important. So there is a list of festivals like Hot Docs and True and False and International Short Film Festival and so on. But someone else might want to talk about that. If not, I'll talk about it later.
Okay, so did you want to add anything here? And also maybe in terms of the different routes that a short documentary filmmaker can go between the festivals and the online platforms. You've done both. And in terms of online platforms, how is the experience for the filmmakers?
So the same list, more or less, that Flora just read out. Maybe just with the inclusion of New York Times Up Docs as well, which has also been very big in commissioning short documentaries. Unlike Flora, I'm a big fan of the documentary festival space. Just on the, potential, just seeing the potential and getting like feedback on, on the film as far as audiences are concerned. That's the space that I've been sort of like working with a lot. what I find is that the different networks that Flora spoke about are quite specific. And I think it's very important for emerging short doc producers and directors to take into consideration is what it is exactly that those networks are looking for. So there's a time where I spent quite a great deal of effort pitching to these different networks. And, you know, it's the strange thing was they were all so eager for the stories, but they all had a very particular way of telling stories, you know. There was something about your central character, protagonist, that just had to be, you know, it's quite unique or special. And I think that was it for the most of them. But I think if you are thinking about making a short or pitching a short documentary to any of these platforms, it would help to just spend quite a bit of time just looking at what it is that they've commissioned already. Because usually the kind of narratives or stories that they put on their platforms can be quite similar in terms of focus, in terms of their politics, in terms of perspective. So this is a very, this is something that kept coming back to me in my interactions with these different platforms. And I think, you know, the online festival spaces for especially emerging filmmakers who just want to get their work out there, it does help to find, you know, curated spaces that aren't necessarily like a festival, you know, but that would put like short content or short documentaries on their platforms that usually don't pay, but it does help again to, you know, to have your film start to have a little bit of engagement with audiences, especially from parts that you haven't really considered.
Thank you. So I think the consensus is that the filmmakers need to think about their audience a lot before they make the film or while they're making the film, thinking where it's going to go, how many people it's going to reach, and also if it fits one of the online platforms that they're aiming for. And there are different options to be commissioned, acquired, and to be paid for their work as well as part of these commissions. So Marina, I wanted to ask you, as an emerging filmmaker, how was your experience approaching commissioners with your latest short film? And if you could also give us an update on where you are with your film now.
Yeah, sure, Lisa. Well, actually, I can frankly say that my experience of approaching commissioning editors is clearly divided between before my engagement with the Global Short Docs Forum and after. I will be mostly telling about my experience of pitching my short doc Last Chance for Justice. And it's a story of retired artist Khadija on her journey to release her husband Azim Jan, who was unlawfully imprisoned for life. And the story is based in Kyrgyzstan, Central Asia. I was lucky to be selected for Global Short Docs Forum last autumn, but I started to work on this film and to pitch it to commissioning editors in December 2019. Just before today's event, I was also reflecting that, in fact, I was pitching my film to the very same commissioning editors who lately became highly interested in my story at the Global Short Docs Forum. Before Global Short Docs Forum, I was writing emails to the different online platforms and broadcasters, and I got no response. But then when I did the 1 month workshop with Global Short Docs Forum, which culminated with the pitching, I saw that the very same people who didn't reply to me, or the very same institutions, are now highly interested and curious about this story. So I was curious to reflect, what did I do wrong? And I realized that actually they didn't reply to me not because they were, like awful people, or they didn't care about the situation of Khadija, my main character, but it's because I approached them in the incorrect way. So before participating in the Global Short Docs Forum, I was approaching them and describing them not a story, but mostly a context. I was trying to convince them why it's important to make this film. And I was trying to convince them that it's really, there are no stories about the situation because Khadija and her husband, they are coming from the Uzbek minority of Kyrgyzstan, and I was mainly trying to explain them that the issues of the Uzbek community are not heard. So instead of pitching the story, I was trying to pitch an issue, which was not correct. I was, after participating in the Global Short Docs Forum, I realized that I also failed in providing the right visual material which accompanies my pitch. So before Global Short Docs Forum, I was just sending a compilation of different visual materials just for them to see that I really got a lot of footage and a variety of footage. But if a person watched this footage without actually having a encounter with me, it wouldn't make much sense, especially for people who are not familiar with the Central Asian region. And when I participated in the Global Short Docs Forum, I realized that sometimes less is more, and I really need to be strategic and question myself, why do I want commissioning editors to see this particular sequence? And thanks to the mentors of the Global Short Docs Forum, I realized that in my particular case, I really need to focus on the strongest parts of my story, which is my character. So instead of providing commissioning editors with a compilation of different sequences, I just provided them a sequence with a really strong scene where they could see and engage my main character. Lastly, because I was emerging filmmaker, in these emails to commissioning editors, I was almost trying to excuse myself that I didn't make any films before. So I was almost telling like, yes, unfortunately, I'm emerging filmmaker, so I did only one short essay film. But after participating in the Global Short Docs Forum, I realized that actually I can better use my previous professional experience, which is in human rights, and explain how this previous experience will help me to distribute this film and produce an impact. So during the Global Short Docs commissioning editors, yes, unfortunately, this is my first film, so I'm not quite sure. I would tell them that, I have a working experience with the UN, and I have a good network with international human rights organizations, which are really interested in seeing this film done, and who are really keen, to use this film in raising awareness about Khadija and her husband. And actually, all these lessons which I learned during Global Short Docs Forum led to the situation that a few commissioning editors from the institutions, which some of them didn't reply to me earlier, then became curious to get to know more about my project. So I got interest from BBC, Vice, Arte, and Al Jazeera, and with these platforms, we continued our discussions later on. And at the end, my short film was commissioned by BBC World News, our World series. And it was globally broadcasted this March by BBC World News and also by BBC News in the UK. and I'm happy to share that it got quite an incredible response. So if at the beginning I was quite hesitant, how can I make this story universal? Because not many people know about Kyrgyzstan, but I was getting feedback from people from different parts of the world who were touched by Khadija's story and who actually wanted to help her. So quite a few people donated some money to her, and because her husband was a painter, some people actually bought his portraits. I also wanted to share that I was precisely able to use my previous working experience in human rights to further share these stories. Quite recently, film was also screened at the One World Film Festival in Prague and Brussels, and it won a special mention, which means that if pandemic situation allows, it will be physically screened in the European Parliament this autumn. And also, as part of this festival, the European Parliament organized high-level screening and discussion around this film. And the Vice President of the European Parliament and European Union high-level representative for human rights for an hour discussed exactly the issue of my main character, Khadija, and the situation of her. And they also made some strong commitments to look into his case and the situation of other Uzbek prisoners. And I was particularly happy that my main character of my film, who became now my friend, Khadija, she was also able to, through this discussion around the film, she was able to address the European Parliament, and ask for some concrete actions. And of course, I was particularly glad to receive feedback from my friends and networks in Central Asia, especially from the Uzbek community, who would say that this event is probably a historic experience for them, because before the situation of the Uzbek minority was unlikely to be discussed at such high level a panel. Yes, as Lisa mentioned, I cannot be more proud to receive an award from One World Media and to know that this film was selected by 2 completely different jury panels. And I hope that the award which film received will also help to raise Khadija's journey further, especially now when she wants to start her fundraising campaign and open an art school in the name of her late husband. So yes, this is where this journey led to me. But if I didn't have this experience with Global Short Docs Forum, I would probably continue until now, sending the emails and pitching not a story, but an issue.
Marina, thank you so much for sharing your experience with us in such detail. It's fascinating to hear your journey, and especially from where you have been, your previous experience, how this film took you through this journey and the impact it's made. It's incredible. Congratulations once again on all of this. It really doesn't sound like luck, but hard work that you've put into it, making all the connections and pushing this film forward. It also shows us actually that maybe the online commissions and festivals are not 2 separate journeys, but for a good film and for a committed filmmaker, they definitely go hand in hand. And I'm really happy to hear about various aspects of this journey, and good luck going forward as well with your other projects too. Okay, so I'm going to go back into the commissioning and how other filmmakers can approach commissioners. So Safisa, I wanted to ask you, as an more experienced filmmaker, how's your experience been? What's the journey for a short film? When's a good time to pitch a film to commissioners?
Yeah, I think, the great time it's probably in development. As mentioned earlier on, that, a lot of these commissioners are looking for specific things. both in terms of story, but also in terms of character. And I find that also having sat on the other side, having worked as someone who adjudicates applications for funding bodies in South Africa, is that a lot of the time, like Marina mentioned, a lot of the filmmakers are pitching an issue or they're pitching an idea instead of a story. And then when you try and unravel what the story is, you then realize that also just the knowledge of just like, you know, what a story is and what makes up, what is story structure, the basics of, you know, of like documentary writing, sometimes aren't very clear, and people get too excited with details. So you find that you have your character and you have your story, but, oh, you know, there's also this, and there's also this element and there's this element, and then they're all adding up and it just becomes very unclear as to what the actual narrative is. And I think that a lot of short documentary filmmakers need to take this very seriously about just how they actually communicate their documentary concept, and what's the separation between just what is a documentary idea and a documentary story. Are you able to tell us what the beginning, middle, and end of your story is? You know, why that specific subject? You know, why, what's, you know, is it topical? Are there any unique aspects? Why now? Timing is also usually very critical, because, you know, it might be an issue that the that the platform is interested in. Say, for example, you know, something that has to do with the environment, or, you know, maybe gender issues. But yes, you are talking about a character that is experiencing something in that world. But what is it about, you know, your character that is unique? And, or, you know, as I mentioned earlier on about the timing. So, you know, separating a good story from a good idea is very important right at the beginning. So it's very frustrating because I find this a lot, and you find that some stories actually have a lot of magic in them, but the way in which the filmmaker is communicating that story doesn't seem to bring out the magic. You know, they're too preoccupied with like a lot of detail, where they can just single out the story and let us know what it is that's that really drives what really drives that story. So that's very important. And I'd say that, you know, I mean, we spoke about research earlier on and about like researching what the platforms and networks are looking for, but also just, you know, showing that you've actually researched your story. You know enough about your character, you know enough about their world, in order for you to sort of like start talking to somebody else. So I find that, you know, both as someone who has been pitching to, you know, to the different networks, as you know, as someone who's been on the other end where I've received pitches, that the understanding of those, you know, those little nuances can get lost very easily. Because I remember personally getting frustrated when, you know, I was pitching something and I thought, you know, this is a really hot story. And, you know, the first person who listens to my pitch will fall in love with it. But just constantly getting rejected and then going back to look at the way in which I've communicated it and realizing that, you know, I even haven't brought out the magic in that story, you know. So that's, for me, is, you know, of paramount importance, to really understand the difference between a good idea and a good story, and really sort of investing a lot of time in researching your character and researching your story. But also, if you are going to speak to a Vice, for example, know what it is that Vice wants, you know, what kind of films do they commission and what kind of films are on their platform. And so that's very important. It's not a, you know, it's not always a one size fits all approach, or, you know, or a machine gun approach where you've got this great idea and you think the whole world is going to love it. It's really just about like making a clear attempt, and I guess effort, to be direct in how you talk about it and who you talk too about it. And funny enough, sorry, I just have to mention this. I'm also, while Marina was talking, I was remembering our sessions, you know, both the one-on-ones and the group sessions. And it was almost obvious what, you know, the magical elements of the story was. And I remember at one point, you know, we had a feedback session and everyone was just saying, hey, but why aren't you showing us this, you know, and these elements? And I'm happy that the film has got to travel, you know, this far and has, you know, done so much meaningful work. It's transformed you, it's transformed your character, but it's also, you know, making changes in legislation, which is very, very important. Congratulations.
Thank you, Sophie. So you've also touched on very important points in terms of finding your character, your story, the beginning, middle, and end, and also knowing the commissioner and the outlet. Flora, what would you add to this for filmmakers maybe who haven't worked with an outlet before? What other recommendations would you have?
Well, I think watching the output, as Sophie said earlier, you know, just really thinking about that particular platform is incredibly important. I can't really say how important that is. It's just so important. I would watch as many short docs as possible, and then watch whichever platforms you're pitching at, also watch their output particularly. So just, yes, knowing the form, if possible, find out some personal details about your commissioning editor, but that's a tricky one. Trying to find out what the priorities are. So if, for instance, they've done a human rights story in Central Asia recently, then don't pitch them a human rights story in Central Asia. You know, if they've just run Marina's story, they're unlikely to do one again for a year. And that's a horrible truth. That's a dreadful, dreadful truth, because you might have a story that's even better than Marina's. I think the why you are pitching that story is incredibly important. So for early filmmakers, I would really encourage you to make a story that's physically close to you, that you can go down the road or go and film with your family. And actually I think I'm talking to a filmmaker later, who has filmed with her family. And I think where you have a cooperative family and forgiving family who let you do anything you like. So I would say down your street, and, you know, not far away, not on the other side of the world, actually, don't go there, especially at the moment. But people who love you and who want to cooperate with you, make it easy for yourself. That's the first thing. But it's a story that you feel passionate about. So there has to be some driving passion for you and some reason why you are making it. I think that's really important. So you have this access that nobody else has. So I think that those are key elements. And then I think footage is incredibly important if you're an early filmmaker, because without that, it's too competitive now. There's no excuse not to have footage. It's have as much footage of your protagonists, or your main protagonists, as you can, because that is proof that it might work as a film. You don't have to have a huge amount, but you've got to have something to show that your protagonist is charismatic and you want to find out more about them. So I think those would be also cost. Just make sure the cost is really low, or not terribly expensive, because you have a better chance of making the film if you don't incur masses of costs. I think that's probably it. I mean, obviously, I think it's helpful to go to commissioning editor with quite a lot of the story shot, but not necessarily a finished film, because they do like to have some input. And also, if it's not quite working for some reason, then they have a dialogue with you about what the story structure is. That's a good thing, both for you and for them. So so the first thing is to have at least some footage of your protagonist, which is convincing. and preferably some footage of a protagonist with actually something happening. And then maybe a bit more than that, you know, about half shot is quite nice, so that you can convince the commissioning editor that you can shoot and that it looks nice and something is actually unfolding. Yeah, I think that's my main thing, and that you've got access. Yeah.
Thank you so much, both of you. I think you've answered most of the questions we received during the application process for Global Short Docs Forum as well. Sipisa, you wanted to add something?
Yes, I was just reminded of this while Flora was speaking, and there's also, what is it, like call outs. So some of these networks, and I know Al Jazeera has one right now, has call outs for filmmakers to submit their proposals, you know, for consideration. And I think just going back to the point about like really what Flora's mentioned about watching the films that they've made before, because I've also made the mistake of wanting to submit the same story over and over again to the same network. Because when they have these call-outs, they might receive 150, 1,000 submissions, and therefore not have the opportunity or the time to give you sufficient feedback. And so without that feedback, you might think, oh, I'll just make little tweaks in my story and resubmit again when they have another call out, when actually they have done a story like yours in the last 6 to 12 months. So that was, you know, a rude awakening for me, because I was then thinking, you know what, let me get back to the drawing board, trying and write this thing differently. And while doing a bit more research, I found that actually Al Jazeera has done a story on this before. I just wasn't aware. So it's really important, again, just to emphasize Flora's point about, like, you know, watching as much as you can and seeing what they've done, because it's happened to me, where, you know, twice I submitted the same concept, just tweeted it a little bit because they didn't give me feedback on the first one, but then realized halfway through the second submission that they've actually done a story with the same topic, but also similar characters as well.
Thank you so much. Really, really valuable advice. I think we've touched on character, access, footage, actuality in the footage, knowing the platform and what they're looking for, what they covered recently, being close to your story, passion, again, availability and access. At this point, I want to talk a little bit about Global Short Docs Forum and what we do at the forum, and why all of these points that we mentioned are really important to us. So Global Short Docs Forum is in its 4th year. We did it in person for the first 2 years and then shifted online even before the pandemic, actually, and then had our 2020 edition online. And again, we'll be doing it online. It will be a 4-week intensive training for filmmakers, and we're looking for projects that tell stories, underreported stories from all around the world, under 30 minutes. So obviously a short is very difficult to define. So it could be 5 minutes, 15 minutes, half an hour, 40 minutes is even a short sometimes. But we as part of the forum, go with under 30 minutes. And then we are looking for projects in production or post-production, which means there is some footage to play with, because as Flora and Sofisa also mentioned, it's really important to show access, show how your character, how your main contributor looks on screen, what's happening to them, what's the story, and just establish that in the footage you already have. Especially for emerging filmmakers, we've noticed that it's a very important thing to have, other than just an idea that you're pitching in an email. So we do require some footage on the story. And then we ask about all the questions that we mentioned here about access, about why you, why now, when are you telling the story, what's the timeline, what's the budget, all of those questions. And then throughout the forum, we have sessions twice a week in group work, masterclasses, one-to-one mentoring, and we talk about the business side of short documentary filmmaking, because unfortunately, most filmmakers end up being their own producer sometimes, or even if they are working with a producer, learning the language of pitching and business and budgets. And we talk a lot about that, how to present your film, how to be confident in what you're asking for. And at the end of those 4 weeks, we have 2 days of one-to-one pitches to platforms who are also looking for these short docs. So it's not just the filmmakers that need to get a commission, but the platforms who really need these films. So there are one-to-one meetings with these people from these platforms, such as Al Jazeera, BBC, CBC, Arte, The Guardian, and many more, changing every year depending on the region we focus on or other international platforms. So this is basically the forum in a nutshell, but I also wanted to ask our panelists here who have been involved in a different capacity, how their experience has been at the forum. Flora, I wanted to ask you first in terms of how do we work with filmmakers at the forum?
Well, the forum is really a pitching forum, and there are many, many pitching forums all around the world, but our forum is all about shorts. And so it takes many of the elements from other pitching forums. We steal the elements from other pitching forums, and we focus on shorts. And I think what it does really is look at your project, your film, and look at how to pitch it, both in writing and visually with your filming material, and also verbally. And it's how those three relate to each other. And it's a sort of evolving process, because the writing and the pictures and how you express it verbally to somebody, they feed off each other really, and it's a very important relationship. So actually some filmmakers are good at 2 but not at 3 of those elements, and going through or even 1, which is I can make a film that I'm not writing and I'm not going to tell you what it is. So it's trying to get those 3 things sort of lined up. And what we do during the workshop is practice those 3 things over and over again with our colleagues and the mentors, and with commissioners who may actually commission the project. And so it's that process. It's really hard work, isn't it? Going through this process of how those 3 things relate to each other, how you practice them all, and how you practice with other people, because it's very important to practice with other people who are your colleague filmmakers or some of the mentors, and then the commissioning editors. So it's getting ready for this finale, if you like, although it's not really, it's a sub-finale, because the finale would be a film being transmitted. And that's sort of the general structure, but obviously it's much more complicated than that. But I will stop there, because I think that's the main part of the structure, because we do also look at budgets and rights and other backgrounds and the different platforms and everything. But yeah.
Thank you. That's a great overview. Marina, I wanted to ask you about your experience at the forum. You obviously talked about how this opened doors for you in terms of the connection you had with the commissioners, but I wanted to ask about the other elements of the forum. How was the 4 or 5 weeks or even longer for you? And how was your experience?
Yeah, thanks a lot, Lisa. I would like to break down my experience into a few points and to talk what I got during these months and until now, because really the Global Short Docs Forum, what I was surprised to learn is it doesn't last only 1 month. It's the official duration of the program, but it's unfolding experience, because it's a community, and if you are keen to stay engaged and if you are keen to continue to learn, you will benefit from this community even after this 1 month. So I want to start that because I'm quite a practical person, and I was particularly motivated to be part of this forum because of the practical skills which is offered. So as Flora said, there are numbers of formats during the Global Short Docs Forum, which really helped me to develop the skills which I lacked. So for instance, I really lacked skills on how to pitch my project in writing, as you already described at the beginning of this session. And during this forum, I had the opportunity to get a feedback on the my particular written pitch. So I got also practical skills on how to pitch my project orally, and it was extremely helpful to have exercises with other filmmakers and with our mentors who would give not an abstract feedback, not something in theory, but who would give a feedback personally to me based on how do I pitch my particular project. Yeah, I also got this very practical and analytical mindset on how to look into these stories and how to, so it changed my perspective in how I look into documentary films now, because now I'm looking into them with this thinking, okay, why did, what made this film work, why it was commissioned, and why it was commissioned particularly for this platform. So there is a set of practical skills which I'm very happy that I got thanks to the Global Short Docs Forum. But there is also something what went beyond my expectations, and what I also got is self-confidence and the feeling of self-worth as a filmmaker. Because before this pitching forum, I couldn't even imagine that I can belong to these places and, you know, having the direct conversations with the people from BBC, Guardian, you know, for me as a person who is coming from Moldova, and, you know, most of the films about Moldova are made by somebody who is not from this place. It was something I could dream about, but not really imagine. And, you know, I also want to share, I didn't fact check this, but many people told me that I'm probably the first Moldovan filmmaker whose film has been commissioned by the BBC World News. And there was a lady who told me, like, wow, you know, all my life I was living and thinking that we live on the earth and BBC is somewhere in the sky. So we couldn't imagine that somebody can actually get their work broadcasted by BBC. So I just want to emphasize that, you know, there is like a huge gap, maybe not only in the knowledge, but also into thinking between filmmakers from particular parts of the world and these broadcasting platforms. So now, after engaging with commissioning editors in person and talking to other emerging filmmakers who did this, you know, I can feel that, yes, I can also belong to these places. So I won't be afraid, you know, to try to pitch to them again, even after I fail sometimes. And also the experience at the Global Short Docs Forum also changed my perspective on how do I look into the future. Because what I learned is also that during the pitching process, you pitch not only your project, this particular project, but you also pitch yourself as a filmmaker. And it really changed my perspective and made me think what kind of a filmmaker I want to be in the future. And it really, this experience with the Global Short Docs Forum and the mentors really teach me that the industry is also about the networking and building relations. So just to give you an example, like I got interest in my project from Vice. We had a conversation, and then I realized that, yes, this particular project is not for them. But at the same time, during this process of engaging with them, they told me that they are actually very interested in some other stories from the post-Soviet space. So I also realized that it's important to also to position yourself as a filmmaker and not only author of this particular project. And last but not least, the Global Short Docs Forum for me is also not only a practical experience, but also, as I said, a community which doesn't stop to be active after the 1 month of this experience. And it made me feel that really I am not alone. I can feel that there is somebody on whom I can rely. So the Global Short Docs Forum community was very helpful also for me to deal with this process of commissioning, editing, when I had conversations with different platforms. But also even just today, you know, now we are staying in touch with all participants of the Global Short Docs Forum. And I was asking them advice on how to launch a crowdfunding campaign because I really want to help my main character to fundraise and to open an art school in the name of her late husband. And my colleague Miriam from India, who was also participant of the forum, she was saying like, actually, I launched a fundraising campaign before. So just, you know, an hour before our conversation, I was exchanging messaging with her. So there are different elements to the Global Short Docs Forum, and I really encourage people who have an idea in mind to apply.
Thank you, Marina. You covered so much again, and it's so wonderful to hear what you got out of that process, and it's also continuing as well. Thank you for touching upon the community element and the confidence as well, alongside all the knowledge about the industry. I'm really, really glad you took all of that with you. So we now opened our applications for the next round of GSDF. And Safisa, I wanted to ask you, as a mentor, what would you say were the most important things we focus on while we work with each project? Because I think that would also help people as they prepare their applications, think about the storyline. You touched upon this a little bit, but could you also tell us a few more pointers? What should filmmakers pay the most attention to?
Yeah, I think I can't, you know, emphasize story enough. But I also just wanted to add a little bit on what kind of space it is. And I love that, you know, Marina touched up on this, that it is really just about community, you know. So, you know, the growth is linear, but it's also lateral, in that there's a lot of contributions that come in from, you know, your peers that aren't necessarily coming from the mentors. And you get to really think about your story in a more sort of like, you know, vigorous and robust way. And what's that kind of, that I felt that what that gives to the participants is that, you know, there's also a lot of time for reflection. So you don't have to feel like you have to get it right at the beginning, because, you know, we'll have sessions where you get contributions from the mentors, but there'll also be sessions where, you know, like peer sessions as well, where you get contributions from the other participants. And I think that's very important for whoever wants to apply, to know that it is a safe space. There is quite a strong emphasis on community. But again, emphasis for me being on story. So just really think about the story that you want to pitch, why you want to pitch the story, and why you're the person to tell that story. You know, both Marina and Flora mentioned that, you know, it really is also about like, you know, how, you know, communicate your intention. And I think that's what we found with the program last year, was that there's, you know, as Flora mentioned, there was always like a disconnect. Maybe the filmmaker might have 2 out of the 3 things. And so it might be important for whoever wants to participate or apply to sort of think about that right now. You know, to think about how well they communicate their idea or their story. I think I said this at the last program. Someone said this to me, you know, a few years ago, you know, that if you don't have a clear log line, you probably don't have a story, you know, which kind of seems like such a hard line take. But the more I revisit that notion, the more I find it to be true. And this is for me, you know. If you can't say what your story is and 1 to 3 sentences, chances are you don't have a story. And so you find filmmakers that are in the program that are very articulate, and again, to Marina's points, they can talk about the issue, quite eloquently. But then, we keep going back to the question of, but what is the story? And it's not so clear, So, thinking about like the separation between the two is encouraged. But also, I think for me, again, what Flora said about like, choosing a story that is close to you, probably even just, in physical proximity is very important, because we do tend as filmmakers to, want to sort of like take on these really big ideas, and maybe your story isn't even in your continent. But then there might be like certain elements that separate you from your story, whether it be physical distance, or maybe because you don't have enough access. So it's not built into your story. We did have filmmakers who were telling stories that were taking place in different continents to where they were. And you do pick those things up in the program down the line, that the passion is there, they might have a strong connection to the story, really strong conviction, but because they're not there to sort of like, film everything, or even just from a research point of view, speak to their characters as often and see them and their daily world as often as they can, that does create a disconnect about the reality of those characters and, the reality of the story and its environment. And so then they have to depend on other people to give them little bits about what's going on. So, that for me was quite evident in the program, that this is really important, about just how much access you have to the story and how close it is to you. So yes, I think those are the important elements, but I can't emphasize story enough. I mean, and by story, I saw a question in the chat box about, what makes a standout submission. I don't know if you want to answer that later.
Yeah, no, let's do it. I was just going to bring that up, please.
Okay, all right, for sure, because I was already speaking about this, but just again, as I said, like a very clear log line, and I can't emphasize that enough, and I've had in my own sessions outside of this program where people have pitched a story and I've mentioned to them like what a clear log line is, what it needs to look like. And I remember the document that was presented to the program last year. There's talk about like why the subject, and having in your log line or in your synopsis, having to answer the what, where, how, and why. If those questions are answered in your synopsis, then you have a pretty clear synopsis. But also, a lot of the time, you find that, in writing the synopsis, it's not clear whether you're telling us the story, you're relating a story, or you're telling us about a topic. And I find that some writers sort of have a very academic approach where, it's not storytelling. It's really just, writing out or talking about an issue without, having considered, what is the story arc? What is the middle? What is the beginning? What is an end? So that for me needs to be quite consistent in your logline, in your synopsis, and to some extent in your treatments as well. So, those elements always need to sort of like jump out of the page. And I remember using this example, and which is often quite funny, is that this is a late night program on one of the channels on South African TV. But they have like, this guy that does like this really comic voiceover, and it basically giving you a synopsis for the program. But they often play like action films. And the guy comes on and is like, one man, one chance. three enemies. and so it's as oversimplified as that is, it really gives you a clear picture of what you're going to be seeing when watching the film, you know? So when you read your synopsis and when you read your log line, does it give a clear indication of what I'll be seeing when I'm watching your short documentary? So this is very important. And I'm emphasizing this because this is something that's in the program last year. We kept going back to with you know, most of the filmmakers at the beginning and some of the filmmakers in the end. That, you know, you might think that you have a great story, but you might have not really interrogated how it is perceived, how, you know, the other person, whether, you know, it's a mentor like me and Flora, or, you know, other participants, or maybe even someone from the platform, or, you know, someone who'll be watching the film. And the more you talk about it, even verbally, it makes a difference if you know, you practice talking about your idea, your documentary idea, or your story, because then you are able to see whether or not those things do jump out of, you know, from your pitch. So it's really important to just like constantly talk about your film. And if you do get stuck, you know, I like to say there's a time where you need to do more thinking than doing. And that's, you know, when you feel stuck, that's, you know, it means that you need to sort of probably step back and think about those specific elements, you know, the how, the why, the where, the when, and seeing whether or not they are embedded in your pitch. I'll stop there for now. I don't know if you want to add anything, Flora.
Thank you. Yes, Flora, what makes a submission stand out, having gone through hundreds and hundreds and thousands of applications for various programs, but also for the forum? What would you say stands out for us?
Good title. Actually, I say that, and I'm teasing slightly because often the title does not emerge till the end. And a title is a working title until the very end. Yes, I think sense of character. What we're really talking about is traditional storytelling, especially on international platforms that will appeal to everybody around the world. And often I think that if you can tell the story to a large range of people, from a child to your grandmother, and they all understand the story because you've told it very simply, a simple story, you know, with some characters that your audience will sympathize with, then that works. It's a very simple formula, but it works, and it'll work around the world to a large audience. So that's what I would say, really, is look for the essence and the simple elements.
Thank you. Those are really, really good points. I think we've touched on different things in terms of having an issue, which is the why, but not the what it is that we're actually seeing on screen. We talked about characters. We also get applications, and I'm sure all the commissioners do as well, about really interesting characters, but there is no story. We don't know what's happening to them. We don't know why we're watching this person other than being interesting. So I think we covered different points in terms of what makes an application really strong, to have the issue, yes, but also a character that represents and that has a really good story that would make us engage with that issue and brings it to our lives. Sifiso, you wanted to add something?
Yes, what Flora spoke about also reminded me of the importance of the title. So I've been in, you know, situations where I really got stuck with the story, and just going back to the title and thinking about why I titled the film that given title, for me then brings back, you know, what the story is about. And we often, you know, right at the beginning of writing a proposal, or even just, you know, our story, you'll put a working title. And it's often the first thing that you make, that you connect the story with, right? Just like naming a child, you know, there's always like a very profound reason why you name the child what you name the child. But halfway down the process of writing, you know, you might actually lose your compass in terms of where you want the story to go, what the end is. Maybe the end is not really resolved. Maybe the middle is a bit murky, and what elements actually make the middle and what make the introduction, you're not sure. But I find that you know, we often neglect the importance of titling and, you know, the title we give to our stories. And it's helped me so many times, just going back to narrow myself, to narrow my ideas down and say, okay, cool. There's all of this detail, you know, and all these trinkets, but what is my story? And if, you know, just going back to the title of the story for me usually answers that question.
Thank you. Marina, I feel like you had your title from the very beginning, which didn't change.
Yes, actually. I had my title, yeah, Last Chance for Justice from quite the beginning. And but before coming up with this title, I was really struggling to how to get into the essence of the film. And I can really connect to what Flora and Sefisa said, that you really need to simplify your story. And for me, this was probably the biggest struggle at the beginning, because I felt like if I simplify my story, I will, in a way, I will betray my story, because on this journey I've got to know about so many sufferings, and if I don't include all these details, you know, I will be a bad person. But then I guess also what I want to advise potential applicants is really to think what is the most important for you. Do you want your story to make a global resonance? Then you need to make sure that people can connect with your story, and they connect only when you really dig out the essence. So simplifying is not a bad thing at all.
That's a very good point. I think that's also something we really work with when we work with filmmakers, that there's so much to tell. There's so much in the story, so much in your mind, and you care so much that it, like, I think you put it really well, it feels like a betrayal to actually get to the essence of it. But thank you, all of you, for those points. There's a question from the audience, and if anyone has any questions, please share with us and we'll try to answer as much as we can. There's a question in terms of length. What's the most favorable or best duration for a short documentary? Which I don't know if there is an answer to this, but on Encounters, it seems like it's around 20 minutes. Is that it? Our audience question says, would you like to answer that? Flora, Sefisa, did you have any ideas on the perfect duration?
I'll go. No, I don't have an answer to that, because it depends what the story is. It depends, you know, which platform it's for. Every film is different. I don't think I have an answer. I think around, you know, for us, and we say around half an hour. But this morning I was watching a short story, actually a drama, and it was 10 minutes long, and I would also, so I'm slightly deviating, because I've been thinking about drama and how it relates to documentary. Also watch shorts, which are fiction shorts, because that will help you when you're making your documentary short. So I'll just say that quickly. So I don't have an answer, because it depends on the story. If it's 10 minutes, a story that you can tell in 10 minutes really well, then 10 minutes. The shorter, the better.
Thank you. Sefisa?
Yeah, so I would say it depends largely on the platforms. And it's usually quite prescribed with the different platforms. So you'll see by either watching the films that they've put up online to watch for free, they usually generally have the same or more or less the same duration. But I think in my experience, it looks like, you know, the durations are shortening for the online platforms, and for some reason, it seems like the 10-minute mark seems like a sweet spot. I think this might be the case for, you know, some strands for the BBC and maybe even Al Jazeera. But I find that, you know, documentary is very tricky, because I think our most loyal audiences are still on television. I stand to be corrected, but in certain countries, documentary viewers are still watching documentaries on traditional television. And so that on that platform, you know, the 24 minutes or, you know, half hour mark is the way to go. So it really is about like the different platforms, you know, who you're targeting with the story. But it also, you know, is about the story, you know, how much impact will it have? You know, you need to think about this as a filmmaker. If it's 10 minutes versus 24 minutes, or even 40 minutes, you know, as you made mention at the beginning. So for me, again, it's really just about looking at the different platforms, look at the kind of story that you want to tell, look at who might likely take it on. If you watch Vice short films, which, you know, are available on their website and on their YouTube page, you'll see that, you know, they're more or less the same in terms of duration, but also in terms of tone. So there is something about them that kind of like jumps at you, you know, there's always a little bit of controversy, a little bit of shock value, there's, you know, and you look at the Al Jazeera documentaries and you find that, you know, there's also similarities there. So again, if you, you know, look at the different platforms and you look at the work that they put out, I think your answer might actually lie there, because then you'll see, not just in terms of story, but, you know, in terms of duration and, you know, treatments, in terms of like the visual language of the documentary, you might see like, you know, a thread in the different films that they've already put out.
Thank you. That really ties into our point of do your research before you pitch your documentary. I think there's also more and more different versions of films as well. I know different outlets are doing this, a shorter version and a longer version, or there are filmmakers who have their film out on an online platform as a short film, and they might make a feature out of it for festivals later on. I think it's very flexible how people work with the short form, and what short is changes a lot as well. Marina, was there anything you wanted to add? You also did different cuts of your film, I think.
Yes, maybe I would just add what I learned is that as a filmmaker, you really need to be flexible if you want to have your film out, because when I pitch my film to the Global Short Docs Forum, I almost had a finished cut, and I was almost sure that I won't be able to tell my story in a decent way if it's less than 30 minutes. But then when I got a call from the BBC, our World Series, they were saying, we like your story, but our strength is 24 minutes. Would you be ready to cut down your story? And then, you know, of course, for me, the most important thing is to be, for this story to be seen and to be seen now, because it was a crucial development also in, you know, in Khadija's life, in the life of my main character. So yes, at the end, I had to give up not just 6 minutes, but more, because the BBC, as also was mentioned by Sifiso and Flora, like each broadcaster, they have their own particular style. And for BBC, they always add a second like part of the story, so they had to take a commentary from authorities of Kyrgyzstan, and they also add a voiceover. So at the end, I had to give up quite a few of the scenes which I was sure they will be in the final cut. But then I was quite surprised and pleasantly surprised by the end results, and now I'm thinking that I could tell this story with an impact even with less minutes. So I guess it's important to stay flexible if you want, what do you want to achieve with your story.
Thank you so much. Yes, I feel like that also touches on the emotional journey of a filmmaker as well, about expectations and being flexible and adapting and making many decisions along the way. So obviously at the stage of applications, we ask our filmmakers what's the intended duration, but it's really important to be open and see where the story goes, see what the platforms are looking for, and adjust expectations along the way. If there are any more questions, please let us know. Otherwise, while we wait for that, I wanted to ask everyone, what would be your top tip for people who might be listening today who are thinking of applying to Global Short Docs Forum? What would be your top tip for their applications? Sifiso.
I would say clarity, a clear submission or application. Don't get too bogged down with the details of your story. Just try and be as simple as you can, and good luck. Yeah.
Thank you. Marina, what would be your tip?
Well, I would probably say don't be afraid and apply, especially if you're a really emerging filmmaker as myself, because, this year I'm trying to convince a lot of my contacts who are emerging filmmakers. And I know that some of them, they have fantastic stories, but they are really afraid because they didn't have any experience before. So I really want to encourage the emerging filmmakers, if you have a great story, but you are afraid that you haven't been commissioned before, I've been there myself, and this is the perfect place to learn. So don't be afraid and apply.
Thank you. Very good encouragement. Flora, what would you say?
So this is the truth. I always go straight to the footage. It's the process of applying to the forum or pitching. It's a very similar process, and what you're doing is it's an enticement. You're courting somebody. You're asking for their time, and so I think respect. I really agree with Marina on overcome your fear, because everybody needs everybody. That's the first thing. So commissioners need you as much as you need the commissioners, even if they don't respond immediately to your emails. And from my point of view, I will always go to the footage. So the footage is very important because it's about filmmaking. It's a visual medium. And so even if you have a problem with writing, don't worry, that's the point of the forum. But the footage is really important. So I would say at least concentrate on the footage. If you're having oh gosh, I've got to write, and now I've got to have a good title, and Sifiso says you've got to have really good, we're going to help you with all of that. But actually what we need to see, most importantly, is some footage to think there is something there. Yeah, that's what I would say. Concentrate on your footage.
Would you give us any tips, Flora, on what you look for when you start watching that footage? What would stand out for you in the footage?
The first thing I'm looking for is character. And then I'm looking for character and something's happening to the character, not just a talking person. And I'm also looking at the relationship between the character and the filmmaker, and how generous the character is. So we've talked about Marina's film, and so the relationship between Marina and her protagonist is beautiful. So there's a great trust between them and sharing, and I think that is really important. And so I'm looking for that. So it doesn't have to be some great drama, although that's always really helpful, but things have to unfold. So I would say, apart from achieving the character, is that you can think visually and offer a variety of visual possibilities, because that's what a film is. It's a visual medium. I'm going to stop there.
Thank you so much. So just a quick update on Global Short Docs Forum. As we talked about a lot, we're open for applications now from today until 22nd of July, and then we go through our selection process, and the forum will take place online in October, November, over 4 or 5 weeks. And we would love to hear from you. If anyone has any questions, you can reach out to us directly. We'd love to help you with your application or with any questions you might have throughout the process. You can find more information on our website, which was shared in the chat, and also on our website, oneworldmedia.org.uk. And if you go to Global Short Docs Forum, you can see the details there. And thank you so much today, Flora, Sifiso, Marina, for sharing so generously your experience, expertise, and your insights and lots of tips. I hope we helped our audience to have a bit more understanding of how short documentaries work on online platforms with commissioners. And if anyone has any questions, happy to help further. Thank you to everyone who was watching us today, to all our audience. Thank you to Encounters for having us here, for hosting this event, to all the festival team and to the festival sponsors. I also want to thank British Council, who's supporting the forum this year. And you can find out more about all the Encounters events on their website. So thank you once again, everyone, for joining us today.